language translation, automated monitoring and translation of foreign language websites, multifunction Android situation awareness device. This is going to be very important. Okay, passive infrared image capture device, unattended video ground sensors. That is also going to be very important. Okay, BBN's research and development expertise spans the following domains: big data, cloud computing, cybersecurity, distributed systems, immersive learning, networking and communication, quantum physics, sensor systems, speech language and multimedia technologies, and synthetic biology tools. This is going to be important. Okay, and as we all know, and if you've watched my videos, that the Jade Helm operation is basically predicated on a platform of network-centric warfare. Network-centric warfare is also a key component of PNAC, the Project for the New American Century. The DoD now mandates that a global information grid, or a GIG, okay, is going to be the primary framework for network-centric warfare. Now let's take a look at this DTIC Newswire, which came out on April 10th, 2015, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. The Pentagon is starting a strategic research and development effort focused on developing next-generation technologies in order for the U.S. military to retain its technological advantage on the world stage. The Long-Range Research and Development Plan, or LRDP, allows industry, academia, and small business to competitively work on new ideas and concepts while focused on specific research areas that will result in new military technologies. This is actually funny because they're spying on everyone, especially technology companies. Why pay you to develop something when they can let you develop it and just take it? It goes on to say that the LRRDP consists of 5 working groups that focus on the following specific technologies: space, undersea, air dominance and strike, air and missile defense, and lastly, a technology-driven group with a goal of identifying and integrating commercial technological advancements. Well, isn't that the mastering the human domain aspect of Jade Helm? Isn't that its foundation? Here at the Department of Defense's Science blog, dateline March 16th, 2015. Let's see. This blog is highlighting the specific work of this particular scientist at the DoD, and he's being asked, what is your role in SSC Pacific's Advanced Photonic Technologies branch? He replies, a rather complicated question. At the DoD's Warfare Center, science and technology professionals are uniquely positioned to serve in many roles. We perform more applied research than you'll find in academia. Well, no kidding. We have out there what's called Tier 1 through 5 and beyond technologies. Tier 1 technology is what you basically find on the shelves at Radio Shack. Tier 2 is more or less the new and innovative stuff coming out, like the Apple Watch. Tier 3 is
alternative media television. Click the link below. Please support our sponsor.
All right, I'm going to skip around here. Stephen Green here.
USA, grab a water filter today. Let them know AMTV and Christopher Green.
AMTV here. Christopher Green talking about Texas. We'll skip around because Jade Helm, she's just not coming through real clear. I will go over here and see what Stephen Hawking has to say. He does say that that this artificial intelligence says that has warned that artificial intelligence, come on, let me get this off. Artificial intelligence could end the human race. Machines that think pose a threat to our very existence, and the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race, the theoretical physicist has told the BBC. Hawking's warnings came in response to a question about the new typing technology used in the computer that allows him to speak, which predicts the words he's going to use, the BBC reported. Stephen Hawking has warned about the dangers of AI in the past, writing in The Independent with a group of leading scientists in May of this year to warn that humanity might not be taking the threat seriously. Stephen, speak up. All right. That ain't coming through yet either. Okay. Losing that Jade Helm. Losing that Stephen Hawking. A1 could be the end. All right. Stephen's BBC is not coming through, so we're going to skip this. And let's see, go back to Texas.
Media television. Click the link below. Please support our sponsor, ProPure USA. Grab a water filter today. Let them know AMTV and Christopher Green sent you. So they want to talk about why the state of Texas, the Republic of Texas, will secede from the Union. In my opinion, it will be the first state to secede from the United States of America. Now, why would a state want to do this? And, you know, a lot of common criticism is it wouldn't even be possible because, you know, the federal government and the Union itself isn't going to allow this to happen without violence. But see, what people aren't taking into account is what is happening to the United States itself economically, structurally, at this given moment in time in history. As I speak and deliver this message to you, the United States in and of itself is dissolving. This is the dissolution of an empire, much like what we saw with the collapse of the USSR and the Soviet Union in the 1990s. It sent it spiraling into a death spiral, a Great Depression that was worse in terms of measurements in GDP, gross domestic product, than what it was experienced in the 1930s here in the United States of America. This was due to failed economic policies. It was due also to the excessive printing of currency that sent Russia's currency into double-digit monthly inflation rates, otherwise known as hyperinflation, and sent the country itself literally into absolute chaos and into poverty. Some even turned to cannibalism. I'm not making that stuff up. That's how bad things really got. So in the atmosphere of a collapsing United States, as we are propelling even more debt, even more printing at the Federal Reserve, we're creating new bubbles in the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and capital markets in general are only helping to improve the likelihood and, in my opinion, assure the dissolution, not just of the dollar as the world reserve currency, but the dissolution of the United States itself. Now, states like Texas, which has three of the fastest of the 5 fastest growing cities in the country right now, which is economic wealthy, has rich natural resources like energy, oil, booming sectors such as healthcare and technology. In its epicenter of Austin is also rated one of the best cities to do business in the country. For every dollar they send into the federal government in taxes, they get back less. This is really not common for a lot of states where Missouri, for example, for every dollar they send into the federal government, they get 2 back. So if they were to secede from the union, they would be insolvent and would have to declare bankruptcy right out the gate. This is not the case or the truth when it comes to Texas. Texas would actually be more wealthy and more rich than it is today if it were to secede from the union. So it's a economically viable alternative for them. Other questions and concerns we need to think about is how would Texas defend itself? Now, of course, with the United States collapsing and its social programs and its infrastructure in general dissolving, there would be millions of refugees swarming into places like Texas, and also would put itself in a position where it would have to defend itself. Now, Texas has more guns in the country, really arguably in the world, than probably any other place. It has its own standing army, so it can defend itself, although that would be a risk that would have to be considered. Of course, one of the reasons Texas first decided to join the Union itself was a result of the Mexican-American War and its fear that it couldn't defend itself from Mexico after recently declaring its independence. But see, what people really don't see is they don't see the big picture. They don't see the picture of the United States collapsing like Russia or other countries throughout history or other civilizations like Rome. They don't see Rome burning. But see, in an environment where the United States dissolves, where it can no longer support its infrastructure, where it can no longer pay its social programs like unemployment insurance or Social Security, creates an atmosphere and an environment that will encourage this type of movement, that will encourage the secessionist movement. So Texas, a great example, and in my opinion, what will be the first state to secede, will be one of many states seceding as the United States breaks apart and really turns into warring nation states, fighting violently, if need be, to declare their independence and their sovereignty. Of course, this was a condition of Texas joining the Union from the get-go. 15 years after it joined the Union, became a part of the United States, the Civil War ensued, where the North and South warred against each other, resulted in over 600,000 plus soldiers dead, and much of the Confederacy in the South destroyed. Texas, in and of itself, in my opinion, very likely to secede in the very near future as these clear and obvious bubbles that have been recreated in our capital markets pop, leave the American people and Americans in general destitute, all dependent on the federal government that can no longer support them. It's exactly why states like Texas will reclaim their independence and will reclaim their sovereignty, and it also is a realistic, viable alternative in a situation where the United States no longer exists. History does repeat itself. You should learn from your history. I'm Christopher Green. Please click the link below. Support our sponsor. Get this out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting, and in your face.
Thank you there. Let's see, Texas declares sovereignty. Let's see who's doing that. Texas governor affirms sovereignty under the 10th Amendment.
At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the governor of the great state of Texas, Governor Rick Perry.
Obviously an old film here.
Brandon, thank you very much. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your initiative to introduce a piece of legislation that I believe is going to be a wake-up call, not just for Texas, but for this entire nation. Here in Texas, here in this capital, we typically spend a lot of time talking about the Texas Constitution. But it's definitely time for us to talk about the United States Constitution. I'm here today to offer my unwavering support to this young man, to all of these members of the legislature who are standing behind me, and more importantly, millions of Texans just like yourself that are tired of Washington, D.C. trying to come down here and tell us how to run Texas. I happen to think this is a pretty bold step. HCR is, as introduced by Representative Creighton, co-authored by Representative Guillen, is a bipartisan piece of legislation. It concerns all Texans. It concerns all Americans. 10th Amendment was enacted by folks who remembered what it was like to have a very oppressive government, to be under the thumb of tyrants and an all-powerful government. Unfortunately, the protections it guarantees have melted away over the course of the years. You're probably familiar with that old adage about how to boil a frog. You know, you just get him to sit there in that pot and you turn up the heat a little bit by a little bit, and before you know it, the frog doesn't realize it, but he's done. And since the United States Constitution was ratified, the federal government's been slowly kind of turning up the heat on the states, if you will, and they've eroded the notion of states' rights. The Founding Fathers understood that a one-size approach doesn't work with the states when it comes to governing, especially a country the size of the United States. And I'll promise you it doesn't work for Texas. Our economic strength compared to the federal budget mess and other problems that they've got up there is a great example that Texans know best how to govern Texas. We're proof that good things happen when government lowers taxes, it lowers regulations, it reduces spending, it encourages private sector growth. You know, when Washington interferes with our proven approach, experience tells us what the outcome's going to be, and it's not going to be pretty. Like the Constitution and the other 26 amendments, the 10th Amendment has been the subject of extended debate. Been a lot of people, Robert, even smarter than you, legal scholars and experts who have discussed this, but when it comes down on the side that favors states' rights over unrestrained federal power, that's the message. That's the right place to be. I happen to believe that the Constitution does not empower the federal government to overrule state laws without restraint. I agree with Texas' 7th governor, and I happen to think its greatest governor, Sam Houston, who once said, "Texas has yet to learn submission to any oppression, come from what source it may." We didn't like oppression then, we don't like oppression now. I believe the federal government has become oppressive. I believe it's become oppressive in its size, its intrusion in the lives of its citizens, and its interference with the affairs of our state. Texans need to ask themselves a question. Do they side with those in Washington who are pursuing this unprecedented expansion of power? Or do they believe in individual rights and responsibilities laid down in our foundational documents? Where are you going to stand? With an ever-growing Washington bureaucracy? Or are you going to stand with the people of this state who understand the importance of states' rights? Texans need to stand up. They need to be heard, because the state affairs that we find ourselves in cannot continue indefinitely. Returning to the letter and the spirit of the U.S. Constitution and its essential 10th Amendment will free our state and ultimately strengthen our Union. regardless of your party affiliation. That is a goal that we all can embrace, and I want to ask all of you over the course of the next week, as you go to tea parties, to stand tall for Texas. Thank you all for being out and coming and showing your support for the 10th Amendment. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions at this point in time. There will be some of the dollars that the federal government is trying to force upon the state of Texas that we will say thanks but no thanks to. Unemployment insurance is one of those. Strings attached to those dollars, which I might add were our dollars to begin with, to make Texas change the way that it does its business. I will refuse those. Dollars that flow back to this state, dollars that we had sent there to begin with, that come back without strings attached, dollars that we could use to grow our infrastructure, to create jobs, we will take and we will show the rest of the country how to do it right.
Governor, has Senator Hutchinson been actively participating in the expansion of federal powers?
I would suggest that there are a number of folks in Washington, D.C. that have seen the federal powers be expanded, she being one of them.
In what ways? What things has she...
I'll get you the long and distinguished list of those shortly. The Texas National Guard is a bifurcated group, if you will. We have a national over...
I had to move that whole thing to get in there to reset the thing was screwed up. All right, folks. That was Rick Perry, and he has disappeared from politics, probably because he did stud up. Now, Governor Abbott has done some good things too. We'll keep an eye on them. But they're all politicians. They're all working for the corporations. They're not working for the people. And maybe what we need is somebody like this. You probably you've been programmed to hate this man, to fear this man. And I'm telling you that all of my research into the First and Second World Wars tell me that we fought on the wrong side in World War II. We fought on the wrong side.
Mein Kampf is one of the most widely known and heavily quoted books of all time. It demonstrates both Hitler's ability to persuade and his ability to instill a sense of heroic destiny. When most people hear the title Mein Kampf, their first reaction is a growing emotional outburst that finally erupts in a yell of anti-Semitism. However, anyone who has read Mein Kampf knows there is much more to the work. It is a retrospective on history, politics, and a guide to achieving power from the point of view of Adolf Hitler. It has become a dictator's manual which has been read by all major dictators since World War II, including Saddam Hussein, who patterned his political movement, the Ba'ath Party, after the Nazi Party. The accuracy of the political parts of Mein Kampf was proven by Hitler's successful rise to power and by the rise of those who have followed his formula. Many people think Mein Kampf is a long diatribe against Jews and other races. The truth is that only a small part of Mein Kampf is anti-Semitic. The majority of it involves Hitler's discussion of the German people's difficult times after the First World War, his political theories, and his organization of the Nazi Party. And it includes an especially large number of attacks against his enemies, which makes it very interesting indeed. Mein Kampf is a large work that offers an interesting interpretation of politics, people, and foreign policy matters. To characterize it as simply a racist work is to oversimplify its message. Germany did not follow Hitler because he was a racist. They followed him because he promised a great future, and in Mein Kampf is where he promised that great future. This is the new and easy-to-read Ford translation. It is the first uncensored version to be made available in over 65 years. It contains both of the original two volumes, the first published in 1925 and the second in 1927, which were later combined into one volume. This translation has corrected over 1,000 errors which were present in past translations. Many instances of Hitler's style were omitted from the older English translations, and some references to mythology and historical people were censored, while common sayings and rhythmic styles, which often made his words poetic in nature, were removed simply because past translators did not understand their meaning or importance. Past translations, even the ones which claimed to be unexpurgated, omitted passages or simply skipped passages the translator could not understand. Older translations often failed to correctly translate humorous passages or sharp satirical jokes correctly, resulting in the meaning being lost. All of these elements have been restored in the Ford translation, and all passages past translators found confusing have been researched, deciphered, and included, clearly and accurately, for the first time. No English reader has been able to appreciate these nuances in any previous English translation, not until this one.
And now we begin.
Volume 2, The National Socialist Movement. Chapter 1. On the 24th of February 1920, the first great public mass demonstration of our young movement took place in the banquet hall of the Munich Hofbrauhaus, an extension of the famous beer maker Hofbrau Brewery. The 25 points of our program were presented to a crowd of almost 2,000, and every single point was received with enthusiasm. We finally had an opportunity to make the first principles clear, and explained our plan for action that would lead our struggle to clear away the chaos of traditional views and ideas and the vague, even harmful aims that were ever present. The new force had appeared to split the corrupt and cowardly privileged class world, and this force would shatter the Marxists' wave of conquest. This new movement would ride the chariot of fate in front of the Marxists' march to triumph, and halt it at the last moment before it reached its goal. It was obvious that the new movement's only hope to achieve the necessary significance and the required strength for the gigantic struggle ahead was, if it succeeded from the beginning in filling the hearts of its followers with the sacred conviction that we're not simply spouting a new election slogan into the political arena, but this new movement was placing a new world concept, one of great importance, in front of the people.
Now, let's look here. Download the Ford translation here. What do I want? Let's see if we can pull up the English translation of this. I have told you many times that if people were able to, if we had been able to understand what Hitler was saying back in the 30s, we might have had a whole different Nope, it ain't working here. All right, let me look for it here. Stick with me, be patient here. All right. You know what? Not going to do that. I'm having trouble finding that. Let's go back to Jonathan Gray's The Forbidden Secret. We only just got into that. And so let's go a little deeper into what he was saying. He also touches on Darwin. And he's got some tips for you. If you don't mind, here are a few tips. Fill your mind with positive biblical input, good books and tapes, and friends who will affirm you in your commitment to your Maker. Maintain this total mental commitment to truth, and you will be swamped by waves of human opinion and bad advice, sometimes from well-meaning friends who are badly informed. The detractors should listen to those who are living it, and not skeptics who are missing out on the amazing benefits. Even if there are no benefits beyond this life, it's worth it now. Just suppose there turned out to be no future as promised. You'd still gained in this life, but what if you discovered later that there was this wonderful rescue plan and you failed to accept it? What then? One of these tips is wake up from the evolution dream. You'd be better off. Break free of that Space Brothers delusion. Get to know your real enemy and not be caught by surprise. Don't trust in some imagined reincarnation and endless succession of lives, pain, suffering, and death. Rise up, rise above your distrust of the intelligence report, the Bible, and your quality of life will improve. Let go of your prejudice against Jesus, and you'll start to live better and be in the running to live longer. Well, obviously, Jonathan Gray leans toward Jesus. But that's okay. That's okay. Here are some of the questions that Jonathan Gray puts up that you probably should answer. What scientific laws support the theory of evolution? How did the DNA information code, that is, the code to translate it, originate separately at the same time? Who programs the many DNA machines, also different from one another, to interact inside a living cell? If mankind evolved from earlier life forms, then why are human remains consistently found in all ages of strata, even alongside the first and earliest fossil life forms? If simple life forms evolved into more complex, then why are complex fossils found perfectly complete in the earliest strata with no evidence of evolving ancestors? If one type of organism evolved into another, then why are there persistent unbridged gaps between major types with no evidence of translation from one type to another? For evolution's punctuated equilibrium, a sudden burst of change into another type to occur, e.g. for a dinosaur to turn into a bird, a creature of mostly different design, how could the genetic code for a large range of brand new, differently functioning organs suddenly appear out of nowhere? If rock strata took millions of years to form, then why do we find numerous examples of single undecayed fossil protruding from multiple ages of strata? If everything has evolved, then why are today's basic types virtually unchanged from their first fossil ancestors? How does new DNA information evolve? Since natural selection is only a selecting from the existing gene pool, resulting in a loss, not a gain, of genetic information, since it removes information and nothing new is adding, while revolution requires an increase of information, how then does natural selection facilitate evolution? If intelligence could not evolve on this planet, but needed input from beings from another planet, then how did intelligence appear on that first planet? If the Bible is a myth, mistakes and made-up history, then why is archaeology consistently unearthing evidence of actual places and persons, as well as physical remains from specific events narrated in the Bible? And why has not one confirmed discovery to date controverted a Bible reference? Why is it that the Bible comprises the only writings on earth with clearly worded prophecies that have proven accurately foretelling centuries of world history? Why is it that the Bible, claiming to be the words of God, and the Bible alone comprises the only writings on earth with an interlocked numeric code within the structure of plain text that man cannot replicate? If the Bible is based on lies, forgeries, and deceptions, then where does it derive its power to transform lives for the better, as thousands of living witnesses testify? If Jesus never existed, or if he possesses no unique living power today, then why do UFO, aliens, and demonic entities in real life today react so emphatically to his name? If Jesus is not the only rescuer of mankind, as the Bible claims, then why is it that only his name can physically halt an alien abduction, a demon possession, of any person on the planet today in actionable real life? Why does his name and no other work? If Jesus did not fulfill the prophecies of the Messiah, then why have Jesus' opponents, since the alleged event, reacted with apparent desperation to cover up evidence by A, deleting specific long-standing prophecies from their own records, B, chopping out 160 years from related Persian Jewish history and imposing a curse upon the reading of one particular prophecy? When with solid evidence, not opinion, you have successfully answered these questions, go back to Prologue B and disprove the overall thesis outlined there and collect your $100,000 reward. And somebody just sent him some news from the Australian, dated November 26, 2010. Suicide twins, Kristen and Candace Hermeller, had God delusion in their luggage. Books found in the luggage of an Australian twin sisters who carried out a suicide pact at a Colorado shooting range suggested they were searching for meaning. They included atheist Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. So, Mr. Dawkins, what does your evolutionary lullabying do to our kids? They emerge from it with a wail of despair, a sob of loneliness, a feeling of the meaningless of life. There follow low self-esteem and animalistic behavior and depression. Now, would you like some good news? Another contact named Merrill got a sneak look into the book you're now reading with this result. I read your book the other night and had my eyes opened up, and it scared the shit out of me. I was feeling hopeless. I was consistently having bad luck. It finally got the better of me, and I was convinced I was a loser, and it was my fault as a human being. I felt suicidal several times. When I read your book the other night, everything made sense. The whole Jesus concept will be very difficult to follow, as I was finally seduced into believing there was no God. I think your book may have saved my life. Now, doesn't that kind of news cheer your heart? You see, our world's in a real mess. And I got to tell you, I'm just kind of feeling the same way. I felt down. Candy? Candy. What is wrong with Angel? Is there something back up there? Is there a mouse up there or something? Oh, that he keeps going under that second shelf there.
No. There's nothing there.
Okay.
It's a duster.
Hmm?
It's a duster.
Whatever, he wants it badly. He wanted his cow. Sorry about that, buddy. He goes on to say, our world's in a real mess, and that's pretty, kind of follows with what I've been telling you. Few will deny it. If it's not war, hatred, loneliness, or selfishness, it's death, sickness, and pain. We've all had just about enough of that, right? Now, here is a fellow who wants to help us. Not only that, he's able to. So what are we doing about it? So who still wants to say Jesus was dreamed up by deceivers in the late first and early centuries? I have let people say that on my show because I don't believe in censoring, and you know, I want to put all the evidence in front of you, all the information in front of you, and you can make your own decisions.
And what's wrong with this one and that?
Now, Jonathan says, come on, guys, can you really believe that a deceiver could invent such supreme truths that perform miracles of character change on people even today, changing wife-beating thugs into gentle-caring husbands and embezzlers into honest men? Anyone who believes such life-altering principles are founded on a forgery has more faith in the power of lies and fraud to raise man up and inspire him with noble ideas than he has in the power of truth to uplift him. Let's get real. A Jesus who is dreamed up by like any other fairy tale or legend is a Jesus who has no more power to change lives than Alice in Wonderland. Almost 2,000 years ago, real men with dirt under their fingernails met a real Jesus who challenged them to follow him. Would numerous men be torn limb from limb, thrown to wild beasts, sawn in two, hung upside down, burned at stake for something they knew to be a deliberate hoax? Why is it some scholars can't tell fact from fiction? They glibly quote others who are just as misinformed. Starting from an anti-supernatural bias, they imagine the historical Jesus to be just a powerless piece of fiction. Let's inject a bit of common sense here. These scholars are centuries removed from the Jesus they speak about. Don't let them con you. I've laid out evidence for you that the Bible record, which reveals that this Jesus person is supernatural in origin, supernatural in design, and can be supernatural in its effect on you and your life. Other books inform you, but the Bible transform you. And my friend Jake Wade, who formed Timothy Bible College, Jake Wade calls the Bible his answer book. And I'm leaning more than this. I mean, a lot of this Jewish problem, the Bible warns you about. Beware the Jews who say they're Jews but are not, or of the synagogue of Satan. How did they know the situation we're in 2,000 years ago? Now, we're surrounded and we're being manipulated and deceived by the Jewish religion, which is really Phariseeism. We are being threatened by the Muslim religion, and I think we really got to stand up against it. Not to go out and kill Muslims like George Bush is doing. I don't think that's the way Jesus would do it. I just don't believe that. Christianity is the only religion which bases its essential tenets on the facts of history. If your life depended on it, which would make more sense to trust, biased, faulty scholars living 2,000 years later are eyewitnesses who wrote the New Testament and bore testimony close to the events and whose lives were changed for the better by what they experienced. After all, this is the testimony of those who met Jesus, ate with him, worked with him, and the first-hand testimony of a living power that works today. Can you do better than that? A skeptic on stage challenged anyone in the audience to prove Christianity was true. A young man came onto the stage, and standing there before the audience, he peeled an orange. Then he proceeded to suck it. He turned to the speaker and asked, "Wasn't that orange nice?" "You fool," retorted the other man. "How can I know? I haven't tasted it." "Then how do you know about the Christian life when you haven't tasted it?" You can't judge the deliverer by the numerous fake Christians. Now, I've got a problem with that too. I've been to these churches. I go, Jesus warned you that there would be deceivers. We can argue all day over whether Paul was or wasn't. And it's quite possible that even a Pharisee can change when affected by witnessing Jesus. I didn't witness him personally, and I don't know. But I believe in the words of Jesus, and I believe the Jews hated Jesus, still do. We could kill him again, and certainly the Jews and their treatment of the Palestinians is wrong, because those Palestinians probably walked with Jesus. So this gentleman who wrote this book, trained archaeologist, name of the book, by the way, is Forbidden Secret. He says you can't judge the deliverer by the numerous fake Christians who talk but don't live it, any more than you can judge whether soap works by looking at the countless dirty children who don't use it. The propositions of biblical Christianity are testable, both historically and practically, and in practical real life. I submit that we have materially and physically proven beyond reasonable doubt sufficient to serve as actionable proof that someone who claims to be our Creator has been communicating with us throughout history, that the authority of one set of documents containing his claim, the Bible, has been substantiated with actionable proof by archaeologies, by prophecy, by its sevens code. The Bible claims that no other name except Yeshua, Jesus, can save us, is being put to real test worldwide in successfully halting alien abductions, testified by respected non-Christian New Age researchers, successfully saving victims from demon possession, countless testimonies, successfully rehabilitating ruined lives, and countless more testimonials, with an abundance of actionable proof in real life. Jonathan Gray says we're all in the feud. Let's sum it up. There is a master plan, and the sooner you get over not wanting to believe it, or worrying that to believe it puts you in the ranks of the nutters, then the sooner you will have a chance to benefit all this. In all fairness, it must be recognized that the architect of the anti-genius slander is none other than Lucifer, the original slanderer, or the devil. Conspicuously or unconsciously, our minds have been tarnished by insidious propaganda. The battle is for the mind. Remember, we're all caught up in the feud between Lucifer, hijacker of the planet, and Jesus the Rescuer. The legion of Lucifer hate the Rescuer and his plan to terminate evil. They are determined to perpetuate Lucifer's rule over this planet. The people that are our real enemies out there that I've talked about, the Bilderbergers, Council on Foreign Relations, the lawyers, and I believe that Jesus talked about the lawyers too. They do hate Jesus. They do hate Christianity, and they are determined to make our lives pretty damn miserable. They are determined to perpetuate Lucifer's rule over the planet. And even the Pope, another false religion there, Christianity, has talked about Lucifer here. They're human puppets installed in positions of power throughout the world, cooked up for us, one whopper after another, big juicy ones. They go down nice and easy. We've been lied to, lots of lies, big lies, little lies. They're playing us for suckers. These leaders have convinced themselves that their supposed evolutionary advancement of competing units such as nations require war to weed out the inferior. This plan of destruction for the human race has been strategized by a genius far beyond the ingenuity of man, orchestrating and synchronizing it from behind the scenes, and Lucifer's stooges have taken over in politics, science, religion, and education, the media and entertainment. Accordingly, it is proclaimed that no one will enter the New World Order unless he or she will make a pledge to Lucifer. No one will enter the New Age unless he will take a Luciferian initiation. That's David Spangler, Director of Planetary Initiative in the United Nations. Among all of the global governing changes that are taking place to accommodate this religion is globalism, many are overlooking the most dominant aspect of it, its religious and occultic nature. The New World Order is about religion. It is obeying Lucifer. Their servants are the movie makers in Hollywood, are occultists who have admitted that they are out to get people's minds. Holly is the wood of a witch's broom. You've heard of Columbia Pictures, named after the ancient pagan goddess Columbia. Concerning the torch in her hand, occultist Edward Schur said the flaming torch is a symbol of Lucifer. Lucifer, having regained his diadem, will assemble his legions attracted by the flaming torch. Celestial spirits will descend. Then the torch of Lucifer will signal from heaven to earth, and the new age of Christ will answer. Mystery Mark of the New Age, page 240. The hostility against the Yeshua Rescue Program, the all-out campaign to persuade us to reject it, is based on Lucifer's savage passion for revenge against the one who tossed him out of his original home. You've been turned off by hypocritical religious people. I understand, so am I, but that's not the issue. The coming final showdown will be, in effect, between Satanism and Jesus Christ. It may surprise you to learn that under job or social pressure, many professed Christians have failed to cement a personal relationship with Jesus and will ultimately cave in and follow like sheep, the demands of the legion of Lucifer and his puppets. Now, I told you I was writing a book about Lucifer. And in it, I intended 45 years ago to examine whether he was the bad guy, whether he was had just been put down. And the more I research it, the more I'm convinced that Jonathan Gray is right, and I will be rewriting my novels to reflect. Don't have to change much. There is a war going on here. The Jews who worship Lucifer do his bidding. Jesus warned you about them. It may surprise you to learn that under job or social pressure, many professed Christians having failed to cement a personal relationship with Jesus, will ultimately cave in and follow like sheep the demand of the legion of Lucifer and his puppets. There you go. I've got the title of my book there. The legions of Lucifer proposes a universal religion made of all kinds of faith, where neither he, the real Jesus, nor true escape can be found. In fact, it favors all religions, but not Jesus, the deliverer. However, the prophecies are clear. The coming Luciferian do-or-die dictatorship will be interrupted by the return of the deliverer to complete his rescue program and establish his undisputed sovereignty over this earth we've messed up. The glorious quality of the coming new earth has already been glimpsed through the characters seen in Jesus' earthly life. The plan is for a new earth cleansed from all who are in disharmony, free from those who would mess up this earth again. Those who don't want the Creator's way will not be forced to endure it. He will just confirm each person's choice. Safety in time of judgment. Merrill was worried. The Bible says we will be judged. That's pretty scary to me. But what would God judge to be a bad person? Also, what about the disabled, helpless people? What about people who are born to really bad people, and bad is all they know? Good questions, Merrill. The answer is that God is not only just, hence he can't let me into his new world if I choose to continue sinning, but he is also merciful. He will take into consideration a person's birthplace, circumstances, and opportunity. Isn't that fair? And in the judgment, one who has permitted Jesus' sovereignty over his life has nothing to fear. He is covered by allowing the deliverer to take his place, and the best of life now. Meanwhile, it is worth asking, why does Christianity seem to work so well in the real world now? A Red Book survey of 65,000 people found that Christians live happier, more fulfilling lives than unbelievers. Even their sex life is better. Keith desperately needed a kidney transplant. His friend Joe came to the hospital and offered his own kidney to save Keith. Joe's generosity landed him with an infection and confinement to a wheelchair, but would you believe that Keith avoided Joe, wanting nothing to do with him? Ungrateful. And Jesus, does he deserve to receive your gratitude? On the other hand, he is giving you the terrifying capability of refusing. Rejectors should be and will be held responsible for their own decision. You want life with security, joy, and hope? It's your choice. Now let's skip forward a little bit. See kind of how he got into this. I told you that this man, he's been on my show, and he is an archaeologist, traveled the whole world. Here's Chapter 10, Archaeology's Verdict. Physical Evidence. The desert pushed right down to the water's edge, and as Said, our Egyptian friend, packed the sleeping gear on the roof rack of our expedition vehicle, Paul watched the sun climb over the sea. If we were not mistaken, there was something quite startling down there on the floor of the Red Sea, and we were about to investigate. But this whole saga begins much, much earlier in that land of romance and mystery, ancient Egypt. Some 3,500 years ago, in the most glorious era of our history, Egypt was the granary of the world. She was eminent in science, the arts, luxury, and magnificence. Egypt was, in a sense, the superpower of that day. And this is where we stumble upon a fascinating old story. Was it just a myth, or did it really happen? Here's the story anyway. In 1526 BC was born a baby who, according to the Old Testament account, was to dramatically alter Egypt's superpower status. Moses was born to Israelite parents in humble surroundings, but in a bizarre twist of circumstances, he grew up to be trained as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Because of his relation to the throne, Moses had all the might and wealth of Egypt at his fingertips. He became a statesman and a general, yet he learned that the thousands of slaves working in the brick pits were his people and that his destiny was linked with theirs. The time came for Moses to make his decision. He chose to become king of what was the world's greatest empire, he could choose to become king of what was the world's greatest empire, or to be numbered among the sweating and grumbling slaves. The biblical book of Exodus tells us that the Hebrew slaves, led by Moses, escaped from Egypt, but they were pursued by the Pharaoh's army. When they found themselves trapped at the Red Sea, a strong wind blew from the east, opened up a passage for them to escape across a dry seabed with a frozen wall of water on either side. But as the Egyptian army pursued, the sea collapsed upon the army and every man was drowned. Now, my work requires that I deal with evidence. Was there any truth to this story, or is it just a colorful myth? Well, at the alleged site, the Gulf of Aqaba arm of the Red Sea, we have had at least 30 international divers scouring the sea floor. Most of our dives have been on the Egyptian side, and hold your breath, we have actually found the remains of chariot cabs and wheels intermingled with skeletal parts of horses and men scattered across the seabed. These chariots' remains were not in perfect condition and required careful examination to see exactly what they were. They were covered in coral, which made it difficult to see them clearly. The coral was the agency that had preserved them. There were numerous wheels. Some were still on their axles, some were off. There were chariot cabs without wheels. Meanwhile, Vivka Ponton, a Swedish lady with a work permit in Saudi Arabia, dived on the Saudi Arabian side and found and photographed more remains. These were similar to what we found on the Egyptian side, wheels and skeletons all mixed together on the seabed. A portion of one wheel was taken up from the seafloor and presented to Nasif Mohammed Hassan of the Egyptian Antiquities Department in Cairo. He pronounced it to be from the same period given in the Bible for Moses and the Exodus. For many today, the study of history is incorporated with ideas that there is no God, miracles are not possible, we live in a closed system, and there is no supernatural. With these presumptions, they begin their critical, open, and honest investigation of history. When they study, for example, the story of Moses and the crossing of the Red Sea, they conclude it was not a miracle or even a real event, because we know, not historically but philosophically, that there is no spiritual dimension. Therefore, these things cannot be. They rule out the exodus of the Israelites even before they start an historical investigation of the Exodus. The suppositions are not so much a scientific bias, but rather philosophical prejudice. Instead of beginning with the scientific and historical data, they preclude it by prior speculation. But now we have seen physical evidence that to convince any unbiased thinking person that the Bible history is real. Why, I mentioned in an email to an email correspondent that my plan to reveal the forbidden secret and to expose those who were expressing it. He said, why introduce the Bible into the discussion? This is my answer. An experienced hand-on archaeologist, I have learned that to ignore the biblical writing is to deprive oneself of a valuable source of information. And assuming that 3,800 times the Bible claims to offer vital intelligence, data beyond what man can discover on his own. So what would common sense prompt us to at least investigate? Yes, we might as well admit it. The real truth concerning our topic will never be found in the opinions of the present world system. The best it can offer is the convenience of thousands of people plundering in and out of theories as though through a revolving door. It is also a fact that if you do not start with the right premise, there's no way you can come up with the right interest. Now let me share with you a trade secret. When we decided to take the Bible myths literally, our archaeology teams began discovering ancient remains that others had been missing. Its clues gave us an outcome more solid than expected. We also found long-forgotten science secrets within the Bible. I now believe it will throw some light on our topic, the forbidden secret, but first let's do some more tests on its accuracy. Crossing the River Jordan. I love skeptics. I was one, and I love the man who smirked when he said, so you convinced one story, but what about this? The Bible says that after the Exodus, the Hebrews came to the Jordan River. It was flood time, but that river, in flood, mind you, suddenly dried up so they could cross over. A tall tale, if there was ever one, impossible. I would have to agree that's quite a story. Well, let's see how you wiggle out of that, he chuckled. As it turns out, there's something interesting about the geography of that area. 16 miles upstream from Jericho, there's a place called Damage, the site known as Adam in the biblical incident. At that spot, the limestone cliffs rise hundreds of feet high, forming a deep, narrow gorge through which the stream flows rapidly, especially at the flood season. Due to the erosion of earth, or earth tremors, or the cliffs at this point sometimes collapse, completely blocking the river with a natural dam. It may interest you to know that the River Jordan has ceased to flow at least on three different known occasions in history. Those were AD 1267, 1907, and 1927. The 1927 events was actually witnessed by archaeologist Professor John Garstang. Newspapers reported that the waters from the upper stream were blocked for 21 hours so that many people crossed and recrossed the Jordan on foot. Stopping the river flow for the Israelites to cross was really a miracle of timing. Could not the Creator control of the laws of nature had He created? We now have evidence that such an event could happen. The critics had a ball. More and more we've been discovering that the biblical record stands up remarkably well to the missiles shot at it by critics. For many years, attacks on the Bible by higher critical scholars of Europe stood unchallenged. That was because so many biblical names and stories were found nowhere else but the Bible, and certainly it did appear that stories were made up. For example, the Bible mentions a nation called Hittites. but they were unknown in history, so critics could claim that the Hittites simply did not exist, had not existed. Then in 1879, S.A. Sayce and W. Knight identified strange hieroglyphical inscriptions found in northern Syria and Anatolia as monuments of the long-lost Hittites. In 1860, the British Encyclopedia Britannica had devoted to the movements of the long-lost Hittites. In 1860, the Encyclopedia Britannica had devoted to the Hittites a mere 8 lines in one column, but in its 1947 edition would give over 10 full pages of 2 columns each to an article dealing with Hittite history, culture, and religion. More widespread digging began to take place in the Middle East, and the deciphering of cuneiform inscriptions started to furnish evidence which would leave the critics dumbfounded. Another apparently wild Bible story concerned the city of Jericho on the Jordan's west bank. After the river crossing, Jericho was the first outpost standing in the way of the Hebrew tribes occupying the promised land of Canaan, Palestine. The Jews say that the Hebrews, led by Joshua, camped nearby. Then they marched around the city every day for a week, and on the 7th day they marched around it 7 times. Yes, 7 times in a single day. Then they blew a chorus of trumpets, and the walls surrounding Jericho came crashing down. 7 times around a city in one day? No, come on. Well, today you can see the remains of ancient Jericho. Archaeological evidence confirms that an earthquake did actually bring down the walls of Jericho, according to Dame Kathleen Kenyon, who excavated the site in the 1850s. Scorching and ashes throughout the city proved the destruction of the wall was the work of enemies. This is precisely how Joshua's capture of Jericho is portrayed in the Bible, an earthquake that broke the city walls and the whole city burned to the ground. Joshua 6:24. During his excavation of Jericho, 1930 to 1936, John Garstang found something so startling he and 2 other members of the team prepared and signed a statement describing what was found. In reference to these findings, Garstang says, as to the main fact, then, there remains no doubt. The walls fell outward so completely that the attackers would be able to clamber up and over their ruins and into the city. Why so unusual? Because the walls of cities do not fall outwards, they fall inwards, yet in Joshua 6:10 we read, the wall fell down flat. Then the people went into the city, every man straight before him. They took the city. The walls were made to fall outward. The fallen walls of Jericho are today precisely those that came tumbling down in the face of Joshua's army. Kenyon's expedition covered a portion of a house wall and floor with an oven and a small jug, which appeared to be the part of the kitchen of a Canaanite woman who may have dropped the juglet beside the oven in front of the sound of the trumpets of Joshua's men. The single dipper juglet was beside the oven, laying on the floor. It was found in situ. It turned out that the archaeological digs substantiated the Bible story in a number of ways. There was a king for each of the small Canaanite city-states, just as the Bible suggests. There were double walls. Only one gateway was found. This harmonizes with the biblical comment about shutting the gate. Unlike the ruins of other Middle Eastern cities, all the cities of Joshua's time and parts of even earlier levels were eroded away. This is not surprising, since the crumbling mud brick structures were not preserved by being built upon by later inhabitants, because the city was unoccupied for centuries after Joshua's time. Pottery found in the tombs outside the city indicate that Jericho was inhabited in the 14th century, just as the Bible states. How about that impossibility of marching around the city 7 times in one day? Some time ago, I explored these ruins, and it's evident that Jericho was actually a collection of tiny buildings compactly crowded together on such a scale that you can easily walk around the foundations in 30 minutes or less. Yes, the city's total size was less than 8 acres. 7 times around would be just about 3 miles. Well, it seems that the biblical history has stood the investigation better than the opinion of the scholars. Nice little side trip here for you folks. Nice little side trip. The name of the book is The Forbidden Secret. You can get that by Jonathan Gray. There's links up on here. There's links for Jonathan Gray on my site, freeamerican.com. And my page here, it's got my magazines, some of my magazines and my books, and some of my videos is shop.freeamerican.com. Mystery of Babylon, the New World Order, will take you on a trip of how I discovered the whole George Bush, a CIA director, starting the drug running into Manuel Noriega. Manuel Noriega was his partner, but because of George Bush's connections, he didn't go to the trial that he let Manuel Noriega take for him. You need to see all this, folks. I am Clay Douglas, and I'm out of here. God bless you all. freeamerican.com.
Okay, your USB is not in these 3 drawers.
That's it?
Your USB to your mouse is not in those 3 drawers. So that's one place down.
Hey,
Huh.
wonder what this is. There's one little short thing in there. I don't know what it's for.
That's it. That's it, right there. That's your mouse. That's your big mouse. So if you put
This mouse?
If you put batteries in the mouse that I brought you from the trailer,
Let's try it.
you got to put batteries in it first.
Huh? Here.
Where's the mouse that I brought you from the trailer?
I don't know. Gotta stop my...
Is this it? This is it. Yeah, this is it. The batteries go in this one. They take double A's. It takes 1 double A.
1 double A?
Yep. Yeah. That's what it shows me, 1 double A. How do you turn it on? Oh, right here. It's blinking. I'm overtaking your mouse.
Yeah, well, hang on just a second. Let me...
Can't overtake your mouse till you unplug it anyway.